Hi, everybody. I'm here with David Joyner, who runs our online CS program, teaching both undergraduate and graduate students. David has been, basically, he grew up at Georgia Tech. He's been here since he was 17. And he's got, 3 degrees from Georgia Tech, and he sticks around. So he's basically heart and soul of Georgia Tech. And his specific expertise, he does research in education, and he's been working a lot with online education and also with AI. He also wrote 2 books on online education and AI. And so what I wanted to do today was to have a conversation about AI, which, is a kind of a phenomenon that nobody can ignore nowadays, talking about the effects of AI in society, in education, and what we can do here at Georgia Tech in order to address this effect and also work with AI. There's a lot of talking about AI and generative AI, and so not everybody might be familiar with what's the difference in the 2 terms. So can you just give a quick, high-level definition of what is generative AI?
Yeah, absolutely. So generative AI is a form of AI, and AI, if you ask 100 different people, you'll get 100 different definitions of it. My definition, at least, is that AI is anytime we create a new system that can do something that previously only something intelligent could do, typically a person. So anytime we create a computer that can create something that before only a human could create, or do something that before only a human could do, that's AI. That's kind of a moving goalpost, because once you've done it, now you have something besides humans that can do it. And so we tend to, over time, think of things as less intelligent once we've created a system that can do it. Generative AI specifically is any kind of AI that tries to create something new that hasn't been seen before. That can be essays, that can be artwork, that can be music, that can be lots of different things. It does this by learning from things that have been created before. So it looks at millions of books and blog posts and music compositions or videos, and uses those to kind of learn different patterns and to then generate things that are new and have never been seen before, but are inextricably tied to things that have been created before. So it's generating something that, at least superficially, looks pretty new.
Yeah, thank you for the explanation. And I think everybody has seen that, has played with in one form or another with generative AI, and we all saw all that it can do. Maybe when we were staring at the white page and we were trying to kind of fill up some content. So it's really impressive, right? And even for people who understand the technology, it's still impressive, because it sort of kind of sounds like magic. It sounds like you're interacting with real intelligence. So clearly, this is having a very disruptive effect on society at large. And some people are concerned. Some people are concerned, for example, creative people, because they feel like, maybe now there's somebody who can do our job. So it's considered, concern also for us educators. So can you tell us a little bit more about, what is the effect from your perspective, what is the effect of society?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this revolution has been fascinating, to see, because it's one of the rare times when scientists and engineers have created something that didn't just go exactly according to plan. It's something that even the people who created it have been impressed at times at what it can do that was never in the design. And there's been some investigation to figuring out, so how can it answer that question so well when by design it shouldn't really be able to do that well? So it's been really interesting to see and really interesting to hear from people. It's kind of, we're all learning about it together at the same time, which is something that doesn't happen a whole lot of times in human history, where there's something come along that everyone kind of has to adjust to all at the same time. And so I think one thing that's very clear is that this is all changing very rapidly, even as the technology, since it launched, or since many of these things launched, they've gotten kind of iteratively better, but we haven't seen, another leap forward comparable to the original one quite yet. But yet we've seen a lot of development as people learn how to use these things, as people learn what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, and how they really should be used kind of effectively. So I think we're seeing some adjustment at a lot of different kind of levels of granularity. You're seeing companies learn that we can do certain things more efficiently. You're seeing people learn, I can use these things to make me more efficient at my job, make me more irreplaceable, because now I'm doing so much better. And then you have this kind of interesting dichotomy of, if there's a company that's trying to figure out how do we operate most efficiently, and you have people using these tools to be more productive, at what point does it become the company needing to really prioritize using these tools as opposed to letting it kind of be organic? I think it's been going pretty well right now, because you kind of have everyone doing some interesting kind of experimentation to figure out how these things work and how they'll really enhance their own kind of ability. What stands out to me right now is that we're still in very much this experimental phase. and you see companies doing a lot of prioritization to say, we want to do more in this area, and want to set guidelines around how to use it correctly. But you haven't yet seen kind of a structural change to it. We've seen some explorations of it. And I think what companies are starting to find, and I say companies as catch-all for all large organizations, is that people play roles beyond what we anticipate. And so you'll talk to some companies that'll find, okay, I can replace these job skills with generative AI. But those weren't just skills I needed done. Those were also the places where my junior employees proved themselves and showed they had the potential to go on the manager track or anything like that. And so if you cut out those kind of that lower rung, where do you find your people now? And I've heard some people say, well, that's your job. You're higher education. You're supposed to teach people the skills they need to know. But there's so much that people usually learn on the job that we have to figure out, what can generative AI do well and how do we actually properly leverage it? So it's not just kind of cutting out the foundation of a building and replacing it with sticks, and it actually can be used to make these things more efficient and effective.
Okay, and then you touched on something that is very much on people's mind, right? You were saying, well, maybe the companies are looking at replacing this job with this other job. And of course, if I'm the person doing that job, I'll be very concerned because, I might lose my job. And there's, however, a strong feeling. Personally, I believe that there's the possibility of actually addressing this issue by upskilling, for example, workers. So and we play a huge role in that as educators. So what is your take on what's going to happen and how AI and how we as Georgia Tech as educators can play a role into in addressing basically the job displacement that can happen because of AI.
As you mentioned at the beginning, I run our online MSCS program that's gotten huge and started with this very generous initial gift from AT&T. And the entire reason why AT&T gave us that initial gift was because they recognized that there's going to be new skills that have to be developed. We have a lot of employees already who are great people. They just don't have the skills they need for this next generation of jobs. And we need a way to efficiently and effectively and rigorously get them the skills they need to thrive as time goes forward. And so I think we can play a very significant role in that. There's always this kind of ecosystem where there's job training and there's higher education and there's boot camps. There's all these different things that serve kind of slight different purposes in different ways. I think where higher education can really play an important role is that this is where knowledge is not just taught, but is also created. And the closer you are to the creation of knowledge, the more you're getting it right at the source, right at the time when it's created, and the more current you are. That's why, some of these skills are in such high demand, is because so few people have the expertise in some of these fields that the only place to go to get it is to the people who are creating this knowledge right now. But they're busy creating the knowledge. They don't have time to go and teach a class on it. They don't have time to help people catch up with the technologies, the potential that are already, which is why I love what I do, getting to teach at scale, because it's all about how do you teach the most people the most effectively with the minimal investment from the initial source of knowledge. That if you're going to rely on a mechanism whereby the person who's out there creating the knowledge, who's creating these new algorithms, creating these new agents, has to devote 20% of the time or 20 hours a week just to teaching people how to use what they're creating, then you're always going to have this very big limitation on how fast these things can percolate out. If we can find a way to channel that person's expertise to a much larger audience much more efficiently, then we can really accelerate how fast the world can adopt these technologies and how people can really upskill and develop the skills they're going to need to be relevant tomorrow using what we know today.
Okay, perfect. And it seems to me like that, Georgia Tech, of course, many colleges, many places, can do, online education can help in this way. But at Georgia Tech, especially, with the last 10 years that we invested in online education, we sort of are in a special place in order to kind of be, we're also, kind of very agile, kind of quickly changing what we teach, how we teach it. And also, possibly if you can comment on the fact that we also have a new unit that is coming online, which is this, probably College of Lifetime Learning. I say probably because, it's not a college yet. Right now it's a division. But, how do you see also the interplay between, online programs, this new college whose goal is to kind of serve the population from basically K-12 to, retirement after retirement and so on. How do you see these things playing together? And part of it is going to build on what you already said, but just, kind of a slightly broader perspective.
You're absolutely right. One of the reasons why we've been able to do some of the things we've done is because we're in the position of both creating the tools we need and teaching the content that we need to teach. And so we're in kind of this interesting place where when we're teaching at scale, when we're teaching online, when we're seeing, okay, I need to deliver this kind of assignment to 900 people this semester. And historically, I've graded it this way, and that way is just not going to scale. There's something we can do to say, okay, I have the technological expertise to go out and build the thing that I need to allow me to do what I need to do. And so that very rapid and closed kind of feedback loop whereby we can recognize a need, and it's not about, okay, let's go find a company, let's go put a call for bids out, let's contract with somebody. It's about, okay, I'm going to spend a couple hours, especially now that I have generative AI to help me, to actually build the thing that I need to do what I need to do tomorrow, has let us kind of innovate very rapidly in that area. And where that's valuable is that, so much of college and higher education and society as a whole is built on this model where, people used to go to school for 4 years, and that would set them up for the next 10 or 20 or 30 years of their career. Maybe they come back for a master's degree at some point, especially to move kind of on the manager track kind of thing. But typically you went to college to develop an expertise, and that expertise was going to serve you for a long time. Nowadays, the half-life of knowledge is much shorter. The things you learn even your freshman year as a college student may not be relevant by the time you graduate. You think that the students we have who arrived here as freshmen arrived in fall 2020. And so we're reeling from COVID, which is this whole kind of own experiment in online education. But they got to college at a time before ChatGPT and Bing Chat, Google Bard, and all these different kind of generative AI solutions came out. And they're going to graduate into a world in which those have now been out for a couple of years. And so the kinds of skills that you need to develop have fundamentally kind of changed, and the rate of change has accelerated tremendously. And there's, I think, two places that we, especially in this kind of lifetime learning initiative, play into that. One is it puts us in the perspective to identify, technical skills and the current technologies and the current languages and the current libraries and all that kind of stuff. That changes very quickly. There are also some foundational skills that really don't change. So for all we talk about, you can't go to school for 4 years and be set for 40 years anymore, there are still some things you learn in those first 4 years that are important. But there's some of those kind of softer skills. They're the perseverance, there's the general problem solving, they're the ability to quickly map out a new problem and understand how to address it. Which is what I've always heard is what employers value about Georgia Tech graduates is they'll say, no, you're not teaching them the exact library or language that we're using, but your students come here ready to persevere, ready to keep trying because you've put them through the ringer. You've really tested them, and they're ready to learn whatever we need them to learn. And so it puts us in the position, first of all, to identify what are the things that students are always going to need. Students are always going to need perseverance. They're always going to need to be able to address new and unfamiliar problems, to be able to acquire new knowledge quickly. And then at the same time, what are the things that are going to change rapidly? What are the things that, the new libraries, new languages, new technologies, right now we're in this place where generative AI has kind of taken over. But tomorrow it might be virtual reality finally having its moment, or tomorrow it might be quantum computing finally having its moment. And so those are going to be in the very same kind of position. And students are going to need to come back and learn about those kind of things as well. And so it also lets us ask the question, how do we create programs, create curricula, create kind of structures for education where it's possible to come back after 5 years and learn something important and new without the classic model of, okay, I have to put my entire life on hold for a year and a half to move back to campus and attend full time and everything like that. So it really lets us think about how to teach people where they are, because more than ever, people are going to have to keep learning, keep being lifetime learners, and keep acquiring new skills.
Okay, well, thank you. And since you're talking about education, actually, before we get to that, you mentioned COVID, and I think that's another great example of where the expertise of the college and Georgia Tech as a whole really played a big role, because we were able from one day to the next to switch to teaching online with very limited disruption. And so that's another example in which being again agile and being up to speed with the technology and experience in online teaching really helped. But again, going back, and talking about education, right? Another, possible concern that many people have about the fact of generative AI taking over is the fact that now when a student turns in an assignment, we don't know whether it's the student who did the assignment or they use generative AI. And, as somebody who teaches, courses that involve, writing documents and writing programs, we are exactly in this sort of conundrum. So tell us a bit more about, as somebody who teaches online and it kind of manages online courses, you see that at scale as well. What are the issues, and how do you deal with the fact of being in this new brave new world in which a computer can do an assignment for you?
No, it's absolutely a concern. I think it's both a significant concern and an overblown concern at the same time, because you talk to some people and it sounds kind of like we're never going to be able to trust anything a student ever does ever again. And really, it's far more iterative. I think there's an analogy to when calculators first came out, and we required students to show their work on their homework and things like that because we can no longer rely on the fact that they didn't just go in and type each formula into a calculator. And so we adjusted. I think that's kind of where we are right now, is that we do some things that allow students to demonstrate they really did, complete the work that they submit. And we've seen different things. Some people now require to see the edit history of certain documents and things like that. But I think as we've had more history and experience using these technologies, it's starting to become more and more clear when a student is over-relying on them. That's in my experience with my TAs. I teach multiple classes that are very essay-based. You hear people, what people say about my classes, and they say, if you're going to take a class with David Joyner, prepare to do a lot of writing, which I think they mean as an insult. I take it as a compliment. But I think we're starting to see some trends in that, where it's becoming more and more clear when a student is over-relying on AI. There's some distantness to an AI reply to a prompt that very much comes from where these, the way these machines kind of work, is that they're putting together patterns of words that are indistinguishable from the patterns that came before. And so you start to see that these are just the words that kind of fit with those other words, but there's not a directness. It's not trying to answer the prompt the way a person would. It's trying to generate the text that seems to fit the prompt. And superficially, that can look very similar. But when you really kind of get down to what you're looking for in the assignment, it very often isn't going to accomplish what you're looking for. And so what we've essentially ended up doing, those kind of trends aren't at the level of I can just look at an essay and say, Alex, you did this with AI, therefore you get a 0. It's not going to be that clear. It's not like plagiarism where I can just put yours up against a book and say, clearly you copied this passage. But it is at the level of, okay, this is not a great answer. It's kind of distant. It doesn't use the class vocabulary the right way. It doesn't use our definitions. It doesn't tie into the things we've talked about. And it's just not a great answer. Previously, I may have considered this a B-level answer, but now that I know you might be relying on generative AI, now it's kind of a D-level answer. And it's not because the answer itself has changed. It's just because it doesn't tell me as much as it used to tell me about what you yourself know. But what we want students to accomplish is still pretty much the same. And what a good answer is still pretty much the same. We can just raise our expectations for what kind of the more, weaker answers are, because we know there is access to this kind of tool. That's kind of where we are now. That's, in my opinion, that's the show your work phase of adjustment to generative AI. Where I hope we go is more in this direction of embracing it a bit more. I'm hoping for the day, math classes fundamentally changed when we could tell students everyone has to have a TI-83. And so now I can rely on you all having this. I can teach you how to use it. I can teach you the different functions. And now I can make you do problems that are only doable with a TI-83. I'm hoping that soon we have that same kind of moment for generative AI where I can say, I know you're all going to have it. We're giving you an enterprise license for it. You all have access to this tool. And here's how I want you to learn it. And here's how I want you to use it. And here's how much more I expect you to do because you have access to this really great tool. And I can now expect more from you than I expected in the past because you can use these new technologies and I can embrace them kind of fully.
You mentioned, a few interesting things here. And in fact, I was thinking, especially the fact that you see the patterns, because we see the same with code and also with documents. And there's also something about if the students are not careful, the language. Mm-hmm. The language is being used, which very, different from what the students will say normally. So that there are ways. But one thing I wanted to touch upon. So we talked about societal impact. For example, work displacement, and we notice how education is a response to that, because you can upskill workers. The College of Computing is uniquely placed in order to be able to do that, because we have a long experience with teaching at scale. We're very flexible and so on. But also in terms of education, right? All these issues that AI is introducing. But the other side of the coin, is the fact that we can also use AI in order to improve the way in which we teach. Right? And there's several examples. Again, within the college, there's several successful examples of how you can use AI, including, work that you do. So can you tell me a little bit more about, how can we use AI to solve the problems that AI is introducing, and in general, to improve the way in which we teach and improve the way we scale teaching?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that, I like that phrasing, because this idea, I should say, I both like and dislike that phrasing, because using AI to solve the problems it's creating is exactly what we need to do. But I've talked to people who kind of take a narrow view of that, of, okay, students are using AI to generate their essays, so we need AI to identify if an essay is generated by AI. And that's a very narrow view of AI solving the problems it creates. And kind of, it misses it's a very legalistic and kind of confrontational, an adversarial kind of view of it. What we really need to do, and what I think we're doing a great job of in the college, is using AI to solve the problem by making the problem go away in the first place. If you have an assignment that an AI can do pretty well, it's no longer a great assignment. And now we can actually design new assignments that leverage the fact that students can use AI to do far more than they were able to do otherwise. But more than just, using AI to create new assignments and expecting students to use these tools, we can use these kind of fundamentally in the teaching process in a way that honestly is the most excited I've been about anything in years, because I've seen how it can impact teaching when we use it correctly and when we encourage students to use it correctly. A lot of schools have kind of taken this very don't use it under any circumstances kind of view, which is, missing, it's losing a crucial benefit because you're not willing to accept some of the risks.
Yeah.
What we've seen is more and more the ability to use these things as teaching agents, to use them to really help students develop a more comprehensive understanding. I recently launched a series of massive open online courses called ChatGPT for Educators. And the focus on it is on how educators can use these different tools, these ChatGPT, because it's the one that everyone kind of keys on, but it applies to all the different generative AI tools, and how people can use them in their classrooms. And we start from this perspective of how we have to adjust based on these things, but then we move through how these things can actually help us do what we do. And where I'm most excited about it is that it gives every student something resembling a tutor. We know that private tutoring is the most effective kind of way to learn. In fact, that's always been the baseline against every other kind of initiative, is how close does it get to having a private tutor? With these kind of new tools, we have the ability to give every student a private tutor, not a world-class one, not as good as a true human, but one that's available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, one that doesn't cost $60 or $80 or $100 an hour, and can do a lot of the same interaction, because so much of the value in a private tutor is not in their content expertise. It's in having someone dedicated to participate in the conversations around these things. I saw this example recently, actually, with my daughter, who has to study for a test. And she asked me just straight out, I'm supposed to study for this test, and I don't know how to study. She's in third grade, and I completely understand. We don't really ever teach students. We teach study skills a little bit, but I think we kind of prompt students with the fact that this is something to study for, so go study. And we expect them to figure out, what does study mean? And so I gave her kind of the rundown of, you can rewrite your notes and reread your notes and reread this. And then I kind of realized, but really you develop your understanding by talking with somebody, but you need someone accessible to talk to. And in school, you have classmates, and that's great. But you're at home right now, and I don't know this thing you're learning about very well, but I know someone who does. It's ChatGPT. So we turned it on and just had a little conversation. It was more kind of a proof of concept, because it's kind of weird when you first get into it. But there's kind of the seeds of it that once you get used to using it as second nature, as we use a search engine, it opens up such a world of instructional possibilities to just have those kind of brainstorming conversations that are the reason why we prize interpersonal interaction in the first place. It doesn't replace that, but that's not always available. And so it creates a way to have those kind of things available to everybody at all times.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And in fact, I believe that you touched on something. We also talked about this in previous conversations, right? The two things. One is this idea that you can have not only an individual, tutor, but also a personalized tutor, so that the learning experience and the teaching experience become much more personalized, which is a long time dream of educators, right? If you have the kind of a customized class for each individual student, and this is something where it could help. So this is definitely one thing. And the second thing, which is something that we discussed previously, is this idea that you don't kind of go against the technology, because there's no way you can do this, right? You cannot stop, this progress. So you kind of go along with it, and you decide, well, you know what, and now you can do a much larger project, for example, that you could do before, because I know that you have these extra tools. And before it was higher level programming languages, right? So if you don't have to write a low level code, you can do better. Now it's kind of, you go up one more level, right? If you can use, prompt engineering in order to write your program, maybe you can do much more, or you can do use prompt engineering to write your essay. You can do much more. So I like this idea that you really kind of grow the complexity of your classes, because you have these new tools available, and that becomes kind of the new level playing field in which everybody is interacting.
Yeah, and that kind of, I think, paints why I tend to be optimistic about these things. One, because if I wasn't optimistic, I just wouldn't be able to, even have these conversations. But also because I think that, there's this fear about it taking jobs and things like that, which are very real fears. But at the same time, I don't see a reason to believe at present, at least, that it's going to get rid of jobs and not replace them with something else. The idea that it's going to get rid of certain jobs and, put a lot of people out of work is assuming there's not a mechanism by which people can reskill, or there are not skills in which to reskill into. It's hard to conceive of a time right now when a company or any kind of enterprise is going to say, okay, here's everything we're doing right now, and we're happy with just exactly what we're doing right now. There's nothing more to do. There's always going to be more. There's always going to be more efficiencies, places to expand the scope of what you do, new directions to open up. And those are the kind of things that AI is not going to be able to do in the near future. You're not going to be able to type in to an AI agent and just say, hey, I run this marketing firm and I want to get into construction. So get me into construction. That's not what it thrives at. There are ways it can make those transitions easier, but there's still going to need to be people who know how to use these tools appropriately. It still has to be someone holding the screwdriver, even if you invent a more efficient and a really smart screwdriver. And so what we have to do in education is just make sure we create those pathways, because you see that right now. You see all this fear over people losing their jobs, but also all this fear about there not being enough people to fill the jobs. And so it's not a question of there are not jobs for people in general, but the concern is more, how do you get the people who are available into the jobs that are going to be great for them for the future, but are also going to stay current and help us continue to grow and improve as a society? We have big problems to address. So it's not a case of, we've solved all the problems, so we don't need to hire anybody because all the problems are solved and everything's gone. We face bigger problems than we've probably ever faced as a society. And so we just need to find ways to move people into the positions that they can contribute to the solutions.
So to wrap it up, and I think, again, you hit the nail in the head, because the idea is really that you create this position, and people should not be scared because they don't need to know all the technological underpinnings of the technology in order to be able to use it. And we can teach people in that way. So that's great. And I think there's also studies, if memory doesn't fail me, that show that every technological advancement resulted in more jobs rather than less jobs. Of course, the nature changes, but there's more jobs. So I guess there are more reasons to be optimistic. With this, I think, it was great to have this conversation with you. I think, we can summarize it by saying that, this technology is disruptive. It's going to have disruptive effects on society, on education, but also, that there's a lot that can be done in order to kind of take advantage of the situation, really, rather than suffering from it. And the College of Computing is uniquely positioned in order to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Any kind of a final word of wisdom that you want to kind of leave us with?
No, absolutely. I think that it's normal to be kind of scared seeing what's coming out, because you're seeing kind of things that, previously only people could do that, and now an AI is doing that. It's kind of reasonable to be scared by that. That's been the way every new technology has been created over the years of, oh my gosh, this is going to change everything. And it will change everything, but in time, and we'll have time to adjust. Bill Gates has a law that says we tend to overestimate the impact of technology over the next 2 years and underestimate it over the next 10 years. And you think about where we were 10 years ago and how much has changed in the last 10 years. We have time to adjust to these new things, both for educational purposes, for workplace advancement, for everything like that. So we have time. So it's normal to be nervous about this, but it's also, it's normal to be excited about it too, because we're about to be able to do things that previously we weren't able to do.
And I think for uber nerds like the two of us, actually, it's very easy to get excited about technology. So that's what we do.
Yeah.
Well, thanks a lot, David. It's been great talking to you, and see you soon.
Yeah.
Bye, everybody.